G'day guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Kaitlyn and I'm an American living in beautiful Sydney, Australia. So I think at this point you guys have figured out that one of my favorite YouTubers who I watch quite a few of his videos is actually Evan Ettinger, and he is an American who moved to the UK, who has gotten UK citizenship, who still has American citizenship. Basically, I've been watching his videos for quite a few years. He is very, very good at what he does because he does quite a bit of research going into his videos. He has a lot of comparisons between the UK and America and what it's like living as an American abroad. And as Americans living abroad, one thing that we both have to do, regardless of the country that we live in, is file and potentially pay taxes to America. Yes, I've lived outside of the States for over a year. I haven't earned a single penny in the US, and I'm going to have to file and potentially pay taxes over in the States. That is not a joke. I'm not making it up. It is not April Fool's Day. It is part of American tax law. It all comes down to FATCA and having to file FBARs. It is a long, complicated thing that I will get into in a future video once I've actually filed taxes over here and can give you guys more of an in-depth look as to what it's like going through the system. But one group who has been screwed over by this law are accidental Americans, aka American citizens who have either never been to the US, they just happen to have an American parent who filed to give them citizenship when they were younger, or they were born in the US but oftentimes moved away when they were very, very young and don't really remember much of their time living in the States. Those are the two main categories for accidental Americans. And America, in its wonderful system that is the tax law, has required that these accidental Americans also file taxes. Once this became law, accidental Americans started renouncing their citizenships in droves, which caused the price of renunciation to skyrocket. About 20 times more than any other first world country. It cost over $2,300 at the time I'm filming this video for an American to renounce American citizenship. It's absolutely ridiculous. It does not cost that much money to process the paperwork. And I have seen this video before. The US just lost this court case against 300,000 Americans. Here's why. This video that Evan put together is pretty well done. I have a couple questions and concerns about this, but this is something that I wanted to bring to the attention of my viewers. Some of my subscribers are subscribers to his channel as well and have sent this video to me either through email or through Instagram DMs. So thank you guys for letting me know that this existed. So without further ado, I've definitely given a long enough intro to this video. Let's take a look and see what Evan has to say about this accidental American court case. So grab a Bicky, grab a cuppa, and let's get right into this video. Maybe grab two Bickies because I think this is going to be a long one.
This right here is a recent case as of this week that was just heard in the District Court for the District of Columbia, which is DC for those of you unaware. Why exactly is this case so important? Who's actually going head to head? Well, the plaintiffs, l'Association des Américains Accidentels versus the US Department of State themselves. And if you are an American that's currently living abroad, the results of this hearing are going to hopefully blow your mind for the better.
So those are the main plaintiffs and the main defendants. So the first defendant to file and the first plaintiff to file. I tried to get a copy of the actual docket, but you have to actually sign up and pay for a Pacer account, and I'm not spending $50 a month plus an extra 15 cents per page to get a copy of the actual docket. But on the docket itself, it does show a list of the defendants and the plaintiffs in this matter. So it wasn't just the US Department of State that was also sued, it was also Anthony Blinken and Ian Brownlee. For anybody who doesn't know, Anthony Blinken is the current Secretary of State. It's a bit of a mouthful, these titles. So they're being sued by l'Association des Américains Accidentels. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. I believe this is a French group that actually filed this, and there is a long list of plaintiffs and their names. So obviously it was a huge group of people that went up against the US Department of State in this matter. It wasn't just this one group versus the US Department of State. They also brought in the Secretary of State and this Consular Affairs something or other.
Hi everyone, my name is Evan Ettinger, and if you're unaware of the current situation Americans have to live through when they live abroad, you probably haven't seen the best video I've ever uploaded on this YouTube channel, in which I detail that the US is one of only 2 countries outside Eritrea that supports citizenship-based taxation, a barbaric system in which you basically pay tax based on your citizenship, as opposed to everywhere else in the world, which goes with residency-based taxation, where you pay based on where you live.
Yes, and if you have not seen it, I will link it down below for you guys after this video. Go check it out. It is so well done. Kudos to Evan, because so much research went into that, and it actually makes tax law interesting. As weird as it sounds and as rare as it sounds, even he was able to make tax law sound interesting and also mildly infuriating.
Because of this situation, it means that Americans abroad are subjected to paying double tax. Now, a lot of people will come up when I say this and say, oh, that's not actually true. There's a threshold, there's a double tax system, so you don't actually have to pay unless you make over a certain amount of money. And while that might be true, that still means that there are a large percentage of people that still do have to pay tax in both countries when there's literally no reason to pay tax in the States. They're giving us literally nothing. But also, the one small thing that people forget to mention is that even if you do not have to pay tax in the States, regardless, you still have to pay an accountant an incredibly hefty fee every single year just to file your IRS documents to tell them that you don't owe them any money.
Yes, and it's mildly infuriating, so I will get more in detail with this with the video that I actually put together, so that way I can let you know what my experience is. I'm still in the process of looking for a good tax accountant. So far I've gotten quotes from 2 of them. One of them is, I'll put this in American and Australian dollars to convert it for you guys. One of them is $660 an hour, and they might not give you much of an itemized bill, so I'm pretty sure my tax return would take a lot less than an hour, but you can be sure they're going to milk it and milk it for 2. So that would be 2 hours worth of work for practically nothing. Or one that I found but is taking forever to get back to me has quoted me about $425 to do my taxes. This is just to file paperwork with the American government that says I make below the threshold that is needed in order for me to actually pay taxes, and I am essentially exempt from paying. But I'm still paying a small fortune to an accountant to actually file these forms for me. Now, I did try to do it myself on an H&R Block system. That did not work out well at all. I'll get more into detail about that with my own personal video coming up in the next couple of months. So if you want to see what that's going to be like, hit the subscribe button. But it is an absolute nightmare of a system, and I know people who have to pay so much money to a tax accountant if they own a property abroad, if they have, say, an Airbnb or a rental property abroad, if they have any sort of investment, whether in or out of the US. It's an absolute headache and an absolute nightmare for so many Americans.
Because the US tax system is so incredibly convoluted and bloated, because the fact that tax-supporting lobbyists, such as the TurboTax and such, made it so difficult and continues to stay difficult for Americans to file, that, listen, if you're an American, just imagine how difficult it must be for Americans not living in the US to file. It's already hard enough for Americans living in the US to file. We have so many extra forms living abroad. I have a tax-free savings account. Oh, that's an extra form. I have a UK-based business. Oh, that's an extra form. What if I get married? Boy, my taxes get even worse. So basically, if you are an American living abroad, you don't really have the same rights as Americans living in the States.
So I looked this up, and I don't know if being married actually does affect filing taxes, because unless you married another American citizen, you're always going to have to file the taxes under married filing separately. So when you file taxes in the States, they're single, there's married filing jointly, and then there's married filing separately. Because my partner's Australian, he doesn't have an American social security number, he hasn't filed for American citizenship or anything like that. So therefore, he doesn't have to pay taxes to the US, and I don't think any of his earnings are going to affect my tax forms, because I'm going to have to file as married filing separately because I'm married to a non-American citizen. I will know a little bit more information when I actually get the chance to talk to a tax accountant over here, but from what I've seen, I'm pretty sure that's the case for like the more simpler cases. It might get a little bit more complex if somebody, say, owns a business with their partner, or say they own like a joint Airbnb or something like that. It might get a little bit more complicated then. But for my situation, I don't think by default it's going to affect a lot of people too much. I think it really comes into play if you have joint investments or joint properties together.
You don't really have that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I mean, there are many reports of Americans living across Europe that because of their first citizenship, they don't have the rights to open a bank account. I personally can't open a stocks and shares ISA, which is a savings account. Just can't open it. Legally speaking, I could, but none of the banks here support anyone that has American citizenship. So really great. The country in which I currently call my home doesn't allow me to essentially be a first-class citizen because of my American citizenship. When people unaffected by this situation hear about it, they often go, well, why don't you just renounce? Get rid of the US citizenship if it's such a big deal. Well, the Obama administration covered that as well. You see, before 2010, none of this was really an issue. The fee for renouncing citizenship was $0, and for the most part, Americans abroad didn't really have a reason to renounce. You know, the dual citizenship thing is pretty cool. You could be a citizenship of England, you can be a citizenship of America, same time, everything's totally fine. They acknowledge it as long as you know what side you're gonna fight on when you're drafted, as if. But 2010, the Obama administration passed this lovely act called FATCA, which caused all the major issues that I've currently been talking about. So, with all the mountains of extra paperwork that FATCA entailed Americans abroad have to suffer from, well, it caused many Americans to be like, actually, I'm weighing this up and it's not feeling too good. And so they upped the renunciation fee from $0 to $450. However, people were like, okay, yeah, there's way too much to worry about here. I'm still going to renounce. And so in 2014,
so just remember really quickly, I just said for one account, the cheapest I've found so far to file my taxes for 1 year is $425 American. The renunciation fee is $450 American pre-2014. Think about that. There's only a $25 difference between me paying somebody that $425 every single year to file taxes for me. Now this is a simple case. If it was more complex, obviously it would be a lot more money. Right now I have a very simple case. Hopefully in like 5 to 10 years it will be a little bit more complex and would actually need to pay some more of those fees. But the reality is it's going to cost more the longer I live abroad. Whereas if I didn't want to have to deal with any of this, once I get citizenship in Australia, or if anybody got citizenship in another country, they could pay what they would pretty much pay an accountant for 1 year to file taxes and just completely renounce and not have to deal with any of this nonsense.
The Obama administration just went, let's just raise it to $2,350 just to get rid of your citizenship. What compelling interest do they have for this? IDK, they just did. So they raised it to a value that is 20 times the average of the top 10 highest earning countries in the world's renunciation fees. 20 times. Even the UK, which is one of the highest costs to renounce in the world, I believe it's at $470 US equivalent. The US is 4 times that much. We are number 1 at renunciation fees. So if you are an American abroad, you've got a couple options here. One, you could just ignore it and pretend that this isn't happening. You could just pay an accountant £1,000 to £2,000 every single year just to tell the IRS that you don't owe them any money, or that you do and it's a very small amount. Or you could just pay $2,350 and get rid of it. Get rid of the citizenship, get rid of the headache, and be totally fine.
There are a lot of caveats to this, and he really touches base on this in his double taxation video. Again, I will link that down below. It's very, very, very well done. But all actions have consequences. There are consequences if you don't file. There are consequences if you do file. And there are consequences if you renounce. So there really is no winning for anybody except for the American government in this situation. I will go into so much more detail, and if you guys have any questions about this that you'd want me to talk about or address in the video that I do in a couple months, let me know in the comments down below. But I will go into more detail about my personal experience, talk about the video that he's put out, as well as a couple other expats, look up some articles. I will give you guys a lot more information on this in a future video. So this is mostly just reacting to this particular court case in Evan's video. I will do my own video in a few months.
But if you go with option 1, see, the issue is with that FATCA Act, even if you don't live in the States, you've never lived in the States, you see, legally speaking, if you just ignore it and the IRS catches you and you haven't signed up and paid this FATCA bill and at least told them how much money you have every single year, well, legally speaking, they can take 50%, that's 50% of all the assets you own, or $100,000, whichever is greater. So that's pretty cool. So obviously option 1's not really on the table, and therefore you're basically being milked for about £1,000 every single year, depending on how many forms, how many different things you've got to fill out, or spend $2,350 once, which either way is not really looking good, because it's not like you just pay $2,350. You also have to basically make sure that you're totally good with the IRS for up to 5 years, which for a lot of Americans abroad who just found out that they actually are required to file their IRS documents every year, oh boy, that's going to cost even more money. And that's where this case comes in. I cannot believe we've actually gotten such positive results. So essentially, the Association of Accidental Americans went up against the US Department of State and claimed that renouncing your US citizenship should be a US citizenship right. You should have the right, as a citizen, to be able to renounce. And
yes, this is very much true. And I will link the most recent filing. So there was a website that I got this from, the AmericanExpatFinance.com, that actually does post one of the court filings. All the other court filings you have to pay for, but the most recent one is actually available up online now, and this is the Memorandum of Points and Authorities in opposition to defendant's motion for partial dismissal and summary judgment, and in support of plaintiff's cross motion for partial summary judgment. So I actually did understand all of that. I did work in the legal field for about 7 years. But it's basically the plaintiffs requesting an oral argument instead of all this being done by paper. And this is the most recent filing that I saw on the docket itself. I can't get a copy of the complaint without paying. I can't get a copy of any of the supporting paperwork without paying. This was the most recent document that was out there, and luckily the wonderful website did give us the entire document, not just the first page. So it's quite lengthy. I will link it down below if anybody's like a little bit of a legal nerd like me and kind of wants to read all of this, but it goes into so much information. One of the most interesting arguments in this is the renunciation fee violates the due process clause of the Fifth Amendment. Now, I know a lot of people think of the Fifth Amendment, they think of the Hollywood movies and people invoking the Fifth Amendment so that way they don't indict themselves in a criminal case. There's so much more to the Fifth Amendment in that. And I think that this is such an interesting document. I think it's such an interesting argument. So I will link all this down below. There's so much to go over, but if you want to see really what it's like for Americans and the history of being an expat or an immigrant abroad, there's so much to it. This is actually a pretty thorough and well-researched document. But anyway, I will get back to the video, you guys. I will link this down below if anybody wants to read it. I'm not going to go into it and personally like read it for you guys or go into it too much in depth because I don't even know if this is a particularly interesting video for you guys, and I'm already rambling so much. So I will keep the legal nerd stuff like to myself for this video, and let's get back to Evan's commentary.
by stating that you need to pay a $2,350 fee that is basically making sure that only the people that have that level of disposable income are able to get out of the tax system, and therefore it is an unfair and unjust policy. Now, weirdly enough, they've been trying to fight this for so long, but for some reason, interestingly, before the hearing actually even took place, 3 days prior, the US Department of State has expressed intent to lower the cost from $2,350 back to the original $400.
I'm wondering if Evan knows somebody or if he actually paid for this, because I'm not able to get a copy of this particular document as well. So the defendants did file this, there was a reply filed, and then there's minutes that are actually posted. I would love to actually get my hands on some of these documents. I really wish I had access, but I'm not paying a small fortune to go check out like the PACER dockets and all that. But anyway, let's get back to this. You guys will see why this is so important.
$50, which is turning quite a few heads in the State Department. In fact, the judge that was here for the oral presentation was a bit puzzled specifically on if this was such an important price that they set for a very compelling interest, why was it that they so quickly were able to be like, oh, we'll just drop it 4 times? Interesting. When asked, well, what was this price about? Like, did you actually check why was this price set? There were no responses from the US Department of State.
I'm curious where he's getting that information from though, and I don't think he put anything in the description regarding this. Now, he put 2 websites which are summary sources, but overall he didn't really give any extra information as to where he got that. The minutes aren't posted as far as like an actual transcript on the docket itself. There's the reply, but again, you'd have to pay for it. I don't have access to the reply. I would love to get a copy of these documents to see exactly what happened, but when it comes to replies, it's typically something that's already typed up and a judge can write in some changes and whatnot and then sign off on the bottom, and that's how the reply would be granted. But overall, I don't know where this is coming from. I don't know if you got a copy of the transcript, because I can't find anything online anywhere that says that this is what the judge said or this is where the judge was coming from in this. There's got to be a piece of the puzzle missing, because for the most part, Evan does a pretty thoroughly researched video when it comes to talking about tax issues, immigrant issues like this. but I'm not sure where he's getting this information. I've not been able to find anything, and even looking at the docket, I can't tell that that information is what would have been available. So I don't know if he knows if there's a video of the actual oral argument itself out there somewhere that maybe I'm just missing doing like my own little bit of research for this. And the small chance that he's ever watching this, Evan, can you tell me where you learned this? Because I have no idea where this is coming from, but the documents don't actually say that the judge have mentioned like any of these questions. I can see a judge actually asking these, whatnot, that would seem like perfectly legitimate question to ask in a court case involving this, but I don't see any definite proof that this is what transpired.
Like, did you actually check why was this price set? There were no responses from the U.S. Department of State. When the judge also was like, well, what actually is going to happen to the people over the last 9 years who have had to spend $2,350 to renounce their citizenship? Are we going to reach out to them and make sure they get the lion's share of that money back, especially if there was no compelling interest for that price to be so high? Yet again, no response. However, it's looking very, very hopeful that we actually might get in 2023, maybe 2024, we might actually get the price to be decreased, which is just really, really good news. To be completely honest with you, I got my US stimulus check for the old COVID stuff in 2020 and 2021, and it worked out to be roughly the same amount as the current renunciation fee of $2,350. So I thought it'd be quite funny if I take the money the US has given me and just renounce, I use it to get rid of the citizenship. I thought that'd be very funny. I don't have to anymore, it seems. If I just play my cards right, just wait a little bit, $450, that's not so bad. But who exactly are the plaintiffs in this situation? Who is fighting for all of our rights here? Well, they're the Association of Accidental Americans. And you might be thinking, how can one be accidentally American? Sounds pretty funny. It's actually quite tragic, especially compared to someone like me who I had most of my upbringing in the States. My first 22 years of life were spent in the USA before I moved abroad to the UK, where this is now my permanent residence and domicile. Accidental Americans, their situation's a bit sadder. So let's just say your mom and dad, American citizens, they have a child in Kansas. You're born there, but your dad, he's looking to peak a little bit, living abroad. He gets a good job offer in Tokyo, you both ship off. You, your mom, your dad. However, even though you spent the first 2 years of your life in the USA, you have no memories of it. You've lived in Japan now, most of your life. You're 34 years old. Guess what? Once you were 18, you were actually required to fill out all these lengthy documents. Have you not been doing that? Sorry, you're an American citizen. Regardless of if you haven't been there in 30 years or so, you need to fill out those documents or we're going to take $100,000 from you. It's ridiculous. And it gets even worse. There are so many people that have never even been to the States. People that, let's just say their parents are American and they had the child, let's just say when they were living in France. Well, the child's never actually been to the States once, but because the parents were American, they imbued it. One of the X chromosomes was a USA flag. Guess what? As soon as you turn 18, you're expected to file those IRS documents every single year until the day you die. It's just a horribly unfair system, which is why citizenship.
So one question that I know a couple people have asked me before when I've talked with friends and family who live in Australia about this, like, well, how can they actually take money from you? The world economy is essentially based in US dollars. And I'm not saying that as, oh my God, I'm an American. I think America's the greatest country in the world and therefore we're so powerful. No, I'm not saying it from like that sort of point of view. It's a fact. Most of the world economy is based in US dollars. And US banks have the strongest economic hold globally. So when FATCA came out, they now require that every single bank in the world, in order to do business with the US, now has to tattle on all of the American citizens that hold bank accounts there. So there are some banks that by default don't have any American citizens. They won't allow American citizens to either open a bank account or hold certain bank accounts in those banks. If you've opened a bank account recently in Australia or maybe another country abroad and you've wondered why you've seen a box randomly on a form asking if you were an American citizen or not, FATCA is the reason why. If you've had a YouTube channel lately or gone onto Google AdSense and you've seen a box that asks, are you an American tax filer? And you've wondered why in the world would they be asking me that? I live in a different country. I've never stepped foot in the US. FATCA is the reason for that. So if the government finds out that there's an American citizen who hasn't been paying their taxes, who has been purposefully ignoring all this, and they want to go get that money, they can then just go directly to the bank and get it. And what happens if the bank says, no, we're not going to do that? American companies are not going to want to do business with that bank anymore. American banks are going to basically blacklist that particular bank. And do you really think that a bank is going to stand up for one customer there? No. Let's face it. They are going to hand over the money and just move on with their day. So it's a very unfair and predatory system for Americans living abroad, and there is essentially no way around this other than renunciation. But as Evan is clearly pointing out in this, if you haven't filed in a very long time, you are going to owe a small fortune before you can actually renounce.
Is horrible and should not be a thing. But no matter how you look at it, this is like the first win I've ever heard of for Americans living abroad. Usually the State Department just kind of slaps loads of stuff on us, this FATCA Act, the FBAR, all these fees, and we just kind of deal with it because even though we're a huge population, if you consider us together, we're spread out around the world. And even though we do have voting rights, my home state doesn't give a crap about my rights about living abroad. The Democrats abroad are always trying to snake into conversations with expats, being like, oh, don't you want to vote for us? There's no difference to an abroad citizen whether or not they vote Republican or Democrat in terms of their specific situation. Neither of the current two political parties that have any viable chance in the States cater to us at all. So we just kind of suck it up, pay our fees, pay our FATCAs, our FBARs, our fee. It's not nice. Anywho, this is one of my rare specialty niches that whenever I find information out about, I will update you on. It's not, imagine if this is all I did on my YouTube channel. I do flat tours. I do a lot of UK versus US stuff. And I talk about US expat relations. Adult stuff. I'm not adult stuff. I don't want to call it that. If I wanted to look up adult stuff on my computer, but I didn't want the US or UK government to know about it.
Okay, so we are going to cut out the sponsorship. Sorry, Evan, on that one, but they're not sponsoring me, so they're not getting any extra paid time on this channel. But it's very true. It's very frustrating. Luckily, I'm at the point, luckily and unluckily, I'm at the point where I only have to pay for an accountant. I don't have to pay for actual taxes over to the States. I do fall under that tax exemption, double taxation threshold, but I'd like to be above that threshold someday, and it would cause an absolute tax headache and nightmare for me. Now, people may ask, why don't you just renounce? Will you consider renouncing when you get Australian citizenship? There is so much to it, and like I said, I will be doing a tax-based video for you guys, and I promise it will not be as boring as taxes sound. I will try to make it a little bit more interesting for you guys so you guys can see what it is like from my perspective having to pay taxes or at least file taxes in 2 different countries. If you have any questions about it, drop it down below or pop on over to my Discord page. I will be sure to address those in the upcoming video, which hopefully I'll actually be able to get my taxes done by like February this year, and I can actually get the video done in like March or April and get that up for you guys. It's all going to depend on when these accountants get back to me, and hopefully some of them will have slightly lower fees, even though I highly, highly doubt it. But anyway, that's it for this video, you guys. I will leave Evan's double taxation video down in the description below. Definitely check it out. It is so well done, so well researched, very much worth taking a look. I'll also drop, as always, the original video down below as well, and I will also drop a couple of bits of reference down for you guys. The court paperwork that's up there, the American expat finance website that I'd mentioned before, I will drop that there below just to give you guys some resources in case you want to check this out a little bit more in depth on your own. But that's it for this video, you guys. I hope you liked it. If you did, please hit the like and subscribe button down below. It really does help support me and help support this channel and help me pay for my very expensive accountant. So that's it for this video, you guys, and I will see you in my next video.